Do you know what? Sack it. I'm talking about it anyway. I don't know whether there's a phone in here. I don't know what question I'm going to ask you. I don't know whether or not you agree with my analysis. If there's the question. Do you agree with my analysis of the situation? There's something about this story that has boiled my blood on a scale that I can't remember happening. And I get quite cross about politics. Indeed, Waterstone's Piccadilly at the moment has my book on display saying in his characteristically angry fashion. That made me angry. How dare they say my characteristically angry fashion? It's an incredibly well-researched and measured book, dripping with clever gags and witty asides. But no, for Waterstone's Piccadilly, admittedly it is in the recommended section, but to say his characteristically angry fashion makes me sound some sort of pastiche. Makes me sound like a character on the late great Steve Wright's radio show. But I gauge anger. I pitch anger. I deal in anger. Because there is a lot to be angry about. And I'm just thinking now, right now, about the moments, the enraging moments. Listen, so the unlawful prorogation of Parliament, right, when they sent J-Dog to lie to the late Queen, that was grim, but it didn't make your blood boil because you didn't really know what prorogation meant. You didn't really understand the gravity of the offence because our media is so bent and biased and it was being done by the Tories. It wasn't really being explained to us in the way that it needed to be in order for us to understand just what an appalling dereliction of duty and breach with parliamentary convention Rees-Mogg and Johnson and Cummings were undertaking at the time. So that was quite enraging. I got quite enraged when they tried to rip up the rule book after Owen Paterson was caught breaking the rules. The more I read into that, the angrier I got because it really was a conspiracy by the establishment to get one of their own off the hook for offences that would have seen anybody else in extremely hot water. And all of the people who complain about the establishment but are actually in it sort of joined forces on this occasion to do something absolutely. It's not beer. It's the new water. It's the new water that comes in cans. It just sounded. I thought I'd be able to do that quietly. It sounded like I just cracked open a tin of Stella at 5 minutes after 10 on national radio, didn't it? We won't be doing that again. Can we get bottles next time, Keith? Can we get a little plastic? No, we can't get. Why not? They're not environmentally friendly. And this is made of metal. Oh, I see. All right, I digress. So I got cross about the Owen Paterson story because it seemed to me to sum up so much of what was going wrong and what was going on. And there's the word I'm looking for. Do you know what the word is? The word that is bubbling beneath the surface of my emotions this morning. Do you know the word that really gets my goat? Impunity. Impunity. Impunity smuggles so many different issues into the conversation, doesn't it? I don't know why I think so often, probably because it happened in this building, of Diane Abbott messing up her sums about police funding or something like that when she was Shadow Home Secretary and had about as much chance of becoming Home Secretary as I do. But she messed up her sums and good God, people still talk about it. Imagine a Conservative. You saw Laura Trott just a month ago not knowing what GDP was while being Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Impunity. The way that a bent and biased media has allowed right-wing politicians to get away with metaphorical murder. It drives me nuts because it robs us as a population of anything that remotely resembles objectivity. And without objectivity, there's no democracy. An uninformed vote is not a proper vote. A vote based on misinformation, lies, bias and propaganda is not a proper vote. It is essentially a box-ticking exercise on behalf of the people who control the flow of information and the flow of news. So impunity is the word, and it's even got a word where you can say it with contempt, can't you? Impunity. It's one of those words that allows you to stretch your lips and contort your face so that you physically convey the emotion that you're feeling. Impunity. They have impunity. I'm turning into Jonathan Pye this morning. I apologise. Why should I apologise? Man's a genius. That's why the Michelle Donelan story boils my blood. Impunity. Impunity and the congregation of circumstances that sums up so much of what has gone on in this country in the last 14 years and more, coupled with the knowledge/fear that nothing will happen. Would you like me to run through the facts before you tell me whether or not I am right or wrong to consider this story to be one of the worst stories of our time together? Because I think I cut my angry teeth, if that's a phrase that I can use without sounding ridiculous, during the MP's expenses scandal. Even though it was broken by the Daily Telegraph, the thing that was beautiful about the MP's expenses scandal is that it allowed you to judge the political class equally. The right-wing media couldn't turn it into a story that only affected left-wing politicians. The right-wing media couldn't pretend that it was only Labour politicians who had been availing themselves of absurdly generous allowances in circumstances that the rest of us would have balked at through basic morality. In retrospect, I was being a little bit unfair on some of the politicians involved. Don't laugh. Seriously, if you arrive in Parliament and someone takes you to one side and says, look, we can't really ask for a pay rise because the public wouldn't wear it. So what everybody does is use their second home allowances and use their expenses to essentially augment their salary rather than simply provide living expenses. And it's all done on a nod and a wink and everybody's at it. So you must join in and you mustn't feel bad. And I think not to excuse it, but to explain it in those circumstances, it was probably a little unfair to get on such a high horse about what they were doing, with a few exceptions. You know, asking us to pay for your stables to be heated, like Nadeem Zahawi did. Nadeem Zahawi, who had to resign over his tax affairs and his economy with the actuality, but still I hear his name cited on TV and radio without anybody mentioning the reason why he got drummed out of his last job. It's extraordinary how these reputations are rehabilitated if it's a right-wing politician. We're back to that word again, impunity. Nadeem Zahawi manages to preside over tax affairs that stank to high heaven, but suddenly he comes back. I think he was at the Kebab Awards. Impunity. These people have impunity. So the expenses is the last time I felt like this. Because it just seems to me to be an example of, and I'm afraid this doesn't apply to left-wing politicians, but however much you might want it to, however much I might want it to, it doesn't apply to Labour politicians. If a Labour politician does something wrong, the right-wing media will not shut up about it. It is almost, I mean, the Diane Abbott example. She should have probably more coverage in some quarters of Diane Abbott drinking a mojito on a train, which she wasn't supposed to drink and a member of the public took an intrusive photograph of, than there is of Laura Trott not knowing what GDP is, or this story today, Michelle Donelan. I mean, let's just pause for a minute to think about what it would feel like for an ordinary person to be accused of backing Hamas in the immediate aftermath of the October the 7th terror attack. The murderous rampage on Israeli soil undertaken by members of a death cult in circumstances that chilled the blood of any vaguely sentient observer. And then Michelle Donelan, the Secretary of State for Science, takes to Twitter to essentially accuse an academic whose name I'm not going to mention on air for reasons explained perfectly by the journalist Poppy Wood yesterday, who did the most to bring this story to light, accusing them of supporting Hamas. I listen, as a kid, because I had an apostrophe in my name, people would say I supported the IRA. And it hurt, actually. It's long before I grew the ludicrously thick skin that you have to do this job. I mean, it's such a horrible thing to say. Whether you take it seriously or not, it's still a hurtful thing to say. It's not saying you're not sufficiently supportive of Israel or you're not sufficiently sympathetic to the Jewish people. It's saying, you see those rapists and murderers over there? That's your team, that is. That's what these people are saying. That's what she essentially said. Secretary of State for Science, speaking about a professor at Heriot-Watt University, accusing a professor of backing rapists and murderers. That's the point, isn't it? It's not that she's said you're not very good at sums, or she said my dad's bigger than your dad, or you're a smelly poo-poo. She's accused them of being on the same side as murderers and rapists responsible for one of the most horrific terrorist atrocities in living memory. And a Secretary of State in our country, in our cabinet, this is a patriotic issue. Our cabinet, our government, our country has a senior politician in it who can malign an independent academic, not on vaguely reasonable grounds for criticism, but as a supporter of a rapist death cult. And she's still in her job. She's still in her job. It gets worse. So legal action was brought against this Donelan woman, and a settlement was reached. A sum of £15,000 was paid without admitting any liability. And let me tell you, unless you have got pockets as deep as the Mariana Trench, taking legal action against people who libel you is an almost inconceivable luxury. You might find a lawyer who is so convinced of your rectitude that they will take on your case on a no-win, no-fee basis, knowing that you will win and therefore receiving their recompense at the end of the process. But otherwise, even if you've got a fair old scratch in the bank, you need to crowdfund or you need insurance it is absolutely punitive even to contemplate taking legal action against people who libel you. Some people who do quite a lot of libeling have transferred all their assets into their wives' names. So even if you did want to sue them, there'd be no point, because when you got your damages at the end of the process, they could plead reasonably that they have no money because all their assets are in their part. I mean, it's a minefield. It's an absolute mess. So settling without any admission of liability is possibly a consequence of one member of this action having the full support of the British government, and one member of this action, the maligned party, the libelled, the appallingly, disgustingly insulted, having to rely upon their own resources. Because it gets worse. A sum of £15,000 was paid without admitting any liability. This approach is intended to reduce the overall costs to the taxpayer that could result from protracted legal action, no matter what the result would have been. Okay, so who paid the £15,000? You, me, or Michelle Donelan? Secretary of State for Science. I know it's hard to keep up. You may not know her name. You may not have it at her fingertips. I think she might be married to someone who got a PPE contract, but I would have to double check that before saying it for certain, because otherwise I'd be running the risk of a tiny, 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 tiny fraction of the offence that she committed against this academic. Who do you think paid that bill? £15,000. You, me, or her? Accusing an independent academic of supporting murderous rapist terrorists from a position of governmental power, from the seat of power in this country. Who do you think paid the bill? You, me, or her? I'll give you a clue. It wasn't her. It was me. And it was you. £15,000 of public money paid in damages to an academic professor, an independent academic working in a prestigious university, accused by a Secretary of State of supporting the rape and murder of October the 7th. I am absolutely staggered by this story. Truly, truly staggered. And yes, I know the history. I know the other examples. I have chronicled, I hope, almost all of them. I have them like in a mental Rolodex in what passes for my brain. I can pull the story out and give you chapter and verse on it. And the bit of this tale that we've missed, where do you think the original horrific allegation came from? Tufton Street. One of these opaquely funded lobby groups calling themselves think tanks or educational charities, and infesting and infecting every single level now of media and government. So 0345 60 973 is the number that you need. And the question that I have for you this morning, and there is almost a desire in me for you to tell me to calm down. All right? This is not the story that you think it is, James. These are not the droids you are looking for. This is not the example of impunity beyond all expectation or precedent that you consider it currently to be. All right? Or you can tell me two things, whether or not you agree, and then I want you to have a crack at explaining me how the hell we've ended up in a place, how on earth we have ended up in a place where this can happen. Because it gets worse. It is understood the payment was the only one made with no extra contribution to the professor's legal costs. So the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology won't tell us what the Secretary of State's legal costs were, and I presume because the prospect of a long drawn-out legal case was terrifying for the victim of this appalling slur, that the £15,000 settlement was taken after fairly robust negotiation. So she's not even picking up the legal fees, which I presume were done on a no-win, no-fee basis. So I'm speculating completely, but I don't imagine much of that 15 grand is going to make its way into the pocket of the libelled professor. But we live in a country where a Secretary of State can accuse a professor of supporting rapists and murderers in a public space, can refer her to authorities, can publish the letter of accusation on social media, and when it turns out to be an absolute pile of crap, she stays in her job. How can that be? How can that be? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need to tell me why I'm wrong, why I'm right, and if I'm right, how this happened. How did we end up here? How did we end up here, right here today, here, with the Secretary of State, that accusation, from that position of power, with this zero consequence? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. 23 minutes after 10. I know what it is. It's that old quote, isn't it, which we used to use all the time when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. There was truth and there was untruth. And if you clung to the truth, even against the whole world, you were not mad. The days I kind of hate the most are the days when I look at something that's happening under our noses and I say to myself, I'm pretty sure that in normal times, in a normal country, this would be huge. But the conspiracy of right-wing media, right-wing government and right-wing think tanks creates an environment in which things that would once have been career-ending now get waved through with complete impunity. And I think the Michelle Donelan story is the best example of that in a very, very long time. But I could, of course, be wrong. 0345 6060 973. David's in Durham. David, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'd like to be able to tell you to calm down, but unfortunately I can't do Michael Gould's ridiculous Scouse accent.
Calm down, dear.
Really, we've reached a situation here with Michelle Donelan that, I mean, you keep saying Secretary of State for Science and Media.
No, Science, Innovation and Technology.
Whatever it is, yeah. She wasn't acting in that capacity. She was on her own personal Twitter account.
Well, there's no such thing, actually. I'm happy to get into the weeds on this, but if it's got that weird greyish tick on it, then it's not. There's no such thing as a personal Twitter account. She tweets as the Secretary of State, and she tweets in a professional capacity because she was essentially publicising a letter she had written to the body, the UK Research and Innovation body, urging it to cut links with the academics because of their alleged support for Hamas. So, I mean, in some ways that makes it a sackable offence rather than a resignation offence, because if I did something on LBC-headed notepaper or I did something from the LBC account that libelled somebody else, my feet wouldn't touch the ground.
Well, that's what I was just about to say. You know, sort of that she's putting something out there that I can't see that it's departmental policy within her department. It's something that she's done on a personal basis. Whatever happened to personal responsibility for what you actually say?
Individual ministerial responsibility. It's not that long ago that Amber Rudd resigned over somebody else's mistakes made in a department before she was even in it. So listen, I don't want a complete succession of nodding heads this morning. I want reasons why this isn't as big a deal as I think it is. You obviously agree with me. So have a crack at explaining how we ended up here. How did we end up here?
Because truth has become a commodity. It's become whatever people decide truth is going to be for their advantage. And that is the way that this government has run since Johnson came along. That is his philosophy on life. Truth is the commodity that you use. And anything that you want to be the truth becomes the truth. And
there's nothing left to challenge it. There's nothing left to uphold the standards that we would once have considered to be commonplace or completely normal. It's a little bit Trumpian, perhaps. There is literally nothing that constitutes an egregious enough offence for the kind of consequences that would once have been commonplace. In my lifetime, certainly in your lifetime, David, you wouldn't be able to stay in the cabinet if you fathered a baby by your secretary while married to somebody else. You wouldn't be able to stay in the cabinet if it turned out that you'd had a holiday paid for by a suspect or a suspicious foreign national. I mean, the idea these days you can be foreign secretary and go and chill out at the Italian palazzo of a KGB spy and then stick his son in the House of Lords. The precise ownership of the palazzo is not clear to me. I don't know whether it's owned by the bloke who was suspended or sanctioned in Canada for being a close member of Vladimir Putin's inner circle, or his son who currently owns the London Evening Standard and sits in the House of Lords. Rico's in Leighton. Rico, what's going on?
Yeah, James, I'm sorry. I'm going to appear to be a little bit of a donk in agreement with you. But you see, in a nutshell, the Donelan episode is just like the latest in a series of things like this. I call it the Brexit slime trail.
I like
because
that.
ever since... Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. I just said I like the Brexit slime trail. So the thing is, if I interrupt you, people say you interrupt too much. If I don't interrupt you, everyone thinks I've died. I am here and I am listening, and I won't interrupt you until you say something silly.
No, but you see, Johnson made me laugh as well from day one because what he could write, he was a classic. He was.
Oh, now the phone line has gone dodgy. We'll get you back. Tony's in Southport. Tony, what would you like to say?
James, you absolute legend. At long last, I speak to you. What a book. Anyway, enough of the backslapping. We're not angry enough, mate. We're just not angry enough.
Is that what it is?
Yes, what it is. As a nation, we're not angry enough.
We've got outrage fatigue, have we? Yeah, of course she's going to get away with it. I mean, you could be right, actually.
Yeah, of course she's going to get away with it. It's perfectly normal. And I tell you what, James, this may sound odd, but you know the chaos theory, butterfly flaps its wings, tornado caused across the world. All that. One wonders if you look at TikTok on social media as one example. Girl on a London bus, on her own, guy comes and sits next to her when she doesn't want him and breaks all the social boundaries of her not wanting him to sit next to her.
Yes.
And that is kind of like the butterfly flapping its wings on social media, and it expands up and up and up. Yeah, trickle up, not trickle down. It trickles up to the highest levels, and I think it corrupts our society, James.
So I mean, this is one for the psychologists, isn't it, as well as the sociologists, but the idea that if the people in power behave with utter contempt for convention, morality and standards, then you cannot sit there clutching your pearls when there appears to be a decline in public behaviour.
Yeah, absolutely. The rot begins at the top. Yeah, absolutely, James. Thank you very much, matey.
I like that. Self-editing as well and bringing it in bang on time for the news, which is a first. Thank you, Tony. 0345 60973 is the number you need. It's almost unbelievable how perfectly this story encapsulates all the things that animate me at the moment. A secretly funded Tufton Street operation puts out some utter bilge. A government minister swallows it wholesale, repeats it, libels an academic in one of the worst ways imaginable, and in order to score online culture war points with right-wing media and supposedly right-wing voters. And when it all falls apart in her hands, she wants taxpayers to bail her out. I think your man there's got a point. At 10 to 10 this morning, I wasn't sure I was going to talk about this. I was doing that thing, well, can I do a phone-in? I even did it in the talk-up just at the end of Nick's show. I said, I'm going to have to apologise to you. I'm very angry about this, but I don't know if I can. I think I'm suffering from disgust fatigue. I think there's so much now in that column, and none of it's made the blindest bit of difference to anything. They're still in their posts. They're still Secretary of State. Johnson gets rewarded with columns and speaking engagements. Even Nadine Dorries gets gigs as a consequence of her disgrace. And you sit here pointing it out. There it is. The emperor is naked. And I suppose there comes a day when if the crowd hasn't realised, or the crowd isn't joining in the catcalls and the descriptions of the emperor's quivering buttocks, there comes a point where you think, I don't know why I bother pointing it out anymore. Luckily, I guess, I have to. But my goodness me, could the emperor be any more naked? And can you think of a better example of the broader malaise than this one? Thomas Watts has your headlines. 25 minutes to 11. Here's a little teaser for you. Why would the section of society affectionately known as the Gaminati, why would they be up in arms about a war memorial for soldiers who died defending the empire, if you like, or the remnants of the empire in World War II? It's an odd one, this, isn't it? There's some proper fury online about an announcement from Jeremy Hunt yesterday that they would be memorialising about 1.5 million soldiers killed in action in World War II on the side of the Allies, on our side. 1.5 million people killed in action in World War II on the Allied side. And Jeremy Hunt has announced plans to memorialise them in this country. And sections of the Gaminati are up in arms about it, if you pardon the rather splendid pun. Why? Now, have a little think about why that might be. We're talking about directions of traffic in British politics over the last few years. I won't mention one of the most unpleasant elements of the last fortnight or so of public discourse, the last month or so of public discourse. But I'm going to tell you something. If you think about this for 20 seconds, you will almost certainly come up with the right answer. So why would the easily provoked, often racist sections of the British electorate who claim to be deeply patriotic and to love our armed forces, how on earth could they have a problem with plans to memorialise, to commemorate 1.5 million soldiers killed in action on our side in World War II? I would love you, I sound like Kevin Keegan, I would love you to reply to that if you don't know the answer already, but you're going to take an informed guess on why the Gaminati would be up in arms about plans to memorialise, to commemorate 1.5 million soldiers killed in action on our side in World War II. What could it possibly be about those soldiers that has enraged people who normally claim to be deeply patriotic, to care passionately about our armed forces, and to believe that our country is in dire need of defence from modern threats? Take it seriously. Don't call me if, or you can WhatsApp me on this. Remember, we've got WhatsApp in the studio now. 0345 6060 973. What would be the single word that springs into your mind when I tell you that little nugget of information there? So the racist end of Twitter is full of people complaining about plans to memorialise 1.5 million soldiers killed in action on our side in World War II. What could it possibly be about those soldiers that has enraged the Gaminati? All right? 0345 6060 973 for WhatsApp. Don't ring in on this one. You can text 84850 as well. And I will tell you, I won't forget to tell you this one. Back to Michelle Donelan. Back to the extraordinary story of taxpayers financing a £15,000 payout to an academic after a minister wrongly accused them of supporting Hamas. Supporting Hamas. How has this happened? And where does it register on your outrage scale? Are we all suffering from a bit of disgust fatigue? So much awful stuff going on now for so long that we've lost the ability to properly pinpoint moments of epic egregiousness. I don't know. Anne's in Huddersfield. Anne, what would you like to say?
I would like to say that ever since the incident in the Rose Garden with Mr. Cummings and that Mr. Johnson man, just threw credibility and load bearing away from anything away from the politicians, anything for a good headline. And they think we're so damn gullible. It's so patronising.
I'm not even sure what this was supposed to achieve. The original libel was presumably supposed to cast Michelle Donelan in a culture warrior role. She was going to cloak herself in the kind of garb that Kemi Badenoch likes to wear and claim to be a doughty culture warrior defending our interests against our enemies. Otherwise, why publicise it? Maybe if you genuinely had fears that an academic whose role was overseen by the UK Research and Innovation body, then you would give them a nod, tell them to look into it as a minister. To publish it on Twitter is performative.
You'd think so. It's this patronising way of thinking they can control everything we think. And they can't. But they keep trying to by dismissing our views.
Two academics suspended from their jobs while the allegations were investigated, and she hasn't been suspended from hers despite making them. It's extraordinary, actually.
Yeah, well, they're wanting to spread the blame to other people, aren't they?
And I like these milestones in our national decline. For you, the Rose Garden's the biggest, is it?
Yeah. Oh, that was the start of, for God's sake, sort of throwing your papers and everything up in the air and thinking, we're lost. We're lost. The idea that you could say, that you could mislead the public so egregiously, so obviously, and get away with it. There's a really interesting moment, Anne. I don't know if you heard it on Nick Ferrari's show. I think the following morning. It's a really interesting moment. I wish I'd picked up on it more at the time. I think it was Michael Gove. I'm pretty sure it was on Nick's show. Michael Gove came on, and I think he started to defend it on the grounds that he had done it too. If you need an example of how corrupt British politics has become, you could do a lot worse than look at Michael Gove. Corrupted, morally corrupted. Because I'm 99%, see if we can find it, I'm 99% sure that Gove came on, you're right to mention that Rose Garden speech, when he said that he'd been driving for miles to test his eyesight. And I'm pretty sure Gove came on with Nick, and, admittedly quite a friendly environment for Gove, and just toyed with the idea of arguing that we all do. Who here hasn't gone for a drive with their baby in the back of the car because they're worried that their eyesight might not be up to sniff? And I think you could even hear in that moment whatever passes for Gove's conscience, and it wouldn't be his conscience, it would be his, I don't think I can get away with this alarm. You can almost hear it going off in the studio, and he stops himself from actually saying, live on national radio, the morning after the country has been lied to on an unprecedented scale, Gove just stops himself from saying out loud, no, I think it's perfectly reasonable to claim that you've gone for a very long drive with your baby in the car on your wife's birthday to a local beauty spot in order to test your eyesight, even though it was in direct contravention of lockdown rules that you helped to introduce at the time. That was probably an even bigger moment than the speech itself, because it was a proper insight into how the minds of these so-called politicians work. Speaking of Michael Gove, this week's Full Disclosure is a doozy, I have to tell you. With Saeeda Varsi, who has been acting with incredible courage and integrity over the last month or so, as her faith, her Muslim faith, comes under extraordinary attack from a party of which she used to be co-chair and still sits in the House of Lords as a peer. Gove comes in for some very interesting analysis in that. It'll be released tomorrow. Can we see if we can find that? It's worth having a look at. Claire's in East Dulwich. Thank you, Anne. Claire, what would you like to say?
Well, I'd actually just like to link the Michelle Donelan case to another matter of a tweet from a member of the House of Lords who tweeted, that's what you say, against...
That is what you say, yes. I believe it is what I say.
Sorry.
Jacqueline
I'm quite
Foster.
elderly, so it's not...
Aren't we all, Claire? Aren't we all? You speak of Jacqueline Foster, I think, who was an MEP and now sits in the House of Lords as a Tory. Yes. And she put out a tweet speaking against a young lady who was a member of one of the Oxford College's University Challenge teams. And she accused the young lady of having put a blue furry octopus as the mascot for the team, that she had chosen it, and that this was in some way some kind of awful slander against Jews, which I fail to understand it anyway. There is an anti-Semitic trope that uses an octopus to represent the supposed tentacles that Jewish people have reaching into every area of society and control. So there is an anti-Semitic trope that involves an octopus, but I mean,
I was unaware of that, and certainly,
so was I, actually.
And the other thing is that she accused her of wearing a Palestinian flag-coloured jacket, which was supposed to be black and green and red. And
it was also white as well, actually. But
this was somehow supporting the Palestinian cause, and that as a result of her doing these two dreadful things, she should be thrown out of her college, her university, and she should be arrested by the police.
This is correct. A former MEP, Jacqueline Foster, called for this Oxford student to be expelled from her university and arrested, without having the wit to realise that a programme broadcast in November of 2023 would have been recorded in approximately March of 2023, long before the conflict in Gaza had even begun. And just to add to your excellent description of this story, do you know where the jacket came from, Claire, by any chance?
No idea.
Zara, one of the most popular.
Oh, right.
One of the most popular female outfitters on the British High Street. It came from Zara. And you're right, and she's still in her job. She's still in her job as well. She's still. I mean, you can't lose a seat in the House of Lords, but she's paid substantial damages and costs because the student involved, who again I don't know if she wants her name in the public eye, so I will refrain from using it, did take proper legal action. And, you know, calling for someone to be expelled from university and arrested, that word impunity is here again. You wouldn't even think of doing that in a normal country at a normal time.
But what really terrifies me is that the more of these things that happen, and when you see what's happening also with the protesters in different areas, that actually that might come a day when somebody in the House of Lords can make a tweet like that, and people will arrest the person or expel them because they're afraid not to. Oh,
I mean, we've seen the direction of traffic in fascistic societies where that kind of, it doesn't matter what you do. If someone can portray it as being an act of treason or an act of hatred, then you will indeed be punished for it. Do you want to have a guess at my game, Claire, while you're here? Can you think why certain sections of our society are both being encouraged and taking up the invitation to be furious about an announcement yesterday that 1.5 million people, 1.5 million soldiers who died fighting for the Allies in World War II are going to be memorialised? Can you think what it is about them that has got people upset?
Yes.
What do you think it is?
I know exactly what it is. They're Muslims.
You're absolutely right. I mean...
Yeah. You know, there's in Woking, there's a small cemetery for the war dead, the Muslim war dead, who were in the armed forces.
I didn't know that.
Yes, it's small and it's quite beautiful. It's quite near, but not exactly next to the Woking Mosque.
Well, that where you live in now.
The oldest purpose-built mosque in the UK.
Is it? Was that the one that Churchill was involved with?
I'm not sure. No, it's before his time.
Is it even before his time? Well, I tell you what, every day's a school day with you, Claire.
18-somethings, yeah.
Well, I shall look that up. I'm a bit sore about Woking at the moment, Claire, because they beat my football team on Tuesday night with a last-minute penalty that, frankly, it wasn't even a last-minute penalty. We saved the penalty, and then the bloke managed to head it in on the rebound. But I don't think in the great scheme of things that is anywhere near as important as the information you've just shared with us, for which I thank you. And, hey, in part 2 of today's Am I Going Mad or Did That Actually Happen? That Michael Gove thing actually happened, right? And I'll share it with you after this. 10:53. It's an open goal for Keir Starmer as well, isn't it? All he needs to say is that if anyone did what Michelle Donelan did on my watch, they'd be out of a job in a heartbeat. And I'm told he has actually said that. So tracking back the decline of our country into a place where a Secretary of State can libel an independent academic, accuse them of the most unimaginably awful thing, support for terrorists, support for murderers, and walk away. Not only walk away, but get you to pay the bill. And looking back, it was Anne, I think, in Huddersfield, looking back for the moments, the milestones on this national decline, mentioning the Rose Garden speech by Dominic Cummings. And I wondered whether actually what was worse was not the egregious nonsense spouted by Dominic Cummings down the barrel of a camera. It was actually this interview here, which no one really picked up on at the time, when you can hear Michael Gove, who's supposed to be a sensible member of the current iteration of the Tories. Listen, it's not my opinion. I'm just giving you the kind of public shtick. Supposed to be one of the sensible ones. I mean, really, the number of pies that Michael Gove has got his grubby little fingers in is extraordinary. He was the one that went to America to interview Donald Trump in slightly friendly fashion, without revealing to readers of the Times newspaper that Rupert Murdoch was actually in the room at the time. It's contempt for ordinary people, that sort of behaviour. It's a belief like almost Roman, ancient Rome, in its belief in social segregation, a sort of hierarchy of humanity. But Gove, in this clip I'll play you now, I think you can hear him thinking, will I be able to sell this one? I mean, I know it's complete crud. I know it's BS. But are the British public stupid enough to swallow this? And then just in the nick of time, he decides, do you know what? We might have sold them Brexit and Boris Johnson, but I don't think I can sell them this.
Would you go on a 60-mile round trip to test your eyesight?
I have, on occasions in the past, driven with my wife in order to make sure that... what's the right way of putting it?
I'm staggered. I don't know how you're going to get out of this one, but it's going to be fun.
No. I think people who know me would know that I'm not an authority on driving, and that I'm not the best person in the world to ask detailed questions about driving.
No, I merely asked you if you've ever been on a 60-mile round trip to test your eyesight, and you said you had.
It's exactly what I thought it was. It's not funny now, is it? To be fair, it wasn't funny then. You got the senior advisor to the Prime Minister lying about breaking lockdown rules by claiming that he was driving for miles with his baby in the back of the car to test his eyesight prior to an even longer journey. And then you get one of the key allies of both of them. Cummings was tighter with Gove than he ever was with Johnson. You can hear it in real time, live on the radio, thinking, are the public stupid enough to swallow this? Can I pretend that going for a drive to test your eyesight is perfectly normal behaviour? And you can just hear, I'll play it once more actually, because it's really interesting this. In the context of our national decline, this is the moment you can hear the whatever it is, whatever the fumes are with which you inflate these balloons of nonsense that the whole Johnson Brexit Gove project floats on. Whatever those fumes are made of, you can hear them seeping out here. There's a puncture, isn't there? There's a puncture here. This is awful. This is absolutely awful. This is the level of contempt that these politicians and some client journalists, not Nick in this case, he asked the question, it was a good question to ask, but this is the level of contempt that they have for the ordinary voters that they keep claiming to represent.
Would you go on a 60-mile round trip to test your eyesight?
I have, on occasions in the past, driven with my wife in order to make sure that... what's the right way of putting it?
I'm staggered. I don't know how you're going to get out of this one, but it's going to be fun.
No. I think people who know me would know that I'm not an authority on driving, and that I'm not the best person in the world to ask detailed questions about driving.
No, I merely asked you if you've ever been on a 60-mile round trip to test your eyesight, and you said you had.
Yeah, he did, and then he realised even I can't get away with this. Even I, with, Rupert Murdoch's little helper, Boris Johnson's right-hand man, even I can't. Married at the time to a Daily Mail columnist. I mean, could you have, and of course a great habitué of the think tanks we talk about a lot, if you want a CV that sums up everything that's gone wrong in this country, it's got Michael Gove written at the top of it. Scott's in Clydebank to steer us back to the national malaise. Scott, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'd like to sadly make you a little more angry. I'll tell you why I think you should be a little more angry.
I've peaked, mate. I've had my green tea and I'm coming back down on the other side of Mount Fury now.
Well, I think if you were Scottish, you would be even more angry. I don't know if you remember or not, but we had a recent incident in Scotland over £11,000 that was submitted. It was an expense that was submitted. The cabinet member, an investigation was done, cabinet member paid £11,000 back and then resigned from post. It was brought up by the Tory leader of the opposition for 3 weeks in a row.
I felt sorry for him. I don't know whether I was supposed to or whether I missed a little bit of the story, but hadn't his kids used his laptop on holiday to stream football and it had ended up... Yeah. And if that's still the established version of events, it shouldn't have gone through on Eckies. But in the great scheme of offences, it's not like his kids borrowed his laptop and accused an academic of supporting Hamas.
Exactly. They watched football on mobile data instead of Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And it was news for weeks and weeks here. And the leader of the opposition for 3 weeks in a row brought it up. and it was the disaster. The Scottish Parliament should have been brought down, screams for his resignation.
Well, I presume he resigned. He resigned just to stop being the centre of attention, did he?
Yeah, that was his exact words, actually.
Was it?
The attention given to this is taken away from the work the Scottish Government are doing and what we are trying to do, and he resigned from his post based on that, which has actually happened a few times with a few members of the Scottish Government with different accusations.
This is a really crucial...
So it's a left of centre.
Yeah,
again,
there it is.
There's the Scottish part of it, obviously, which frustrates me and angers me even more, but it's the left and right. Again, it was a left of centre MP or MSP, and it was a Scottish MSP, so it was huge news. But now we have...
If it had been Owen Paterson, Jacob Rees-Mogg would have launched a bid to change the rules regarding Wi-Fi data and mobile phones.
Apple. It would have been Apple's fault.
It would have been all blamed on Apple or the EU. It's ridiculous, these roaming rules. I mean, that's a really good example. I wasn't sure where you were going with that at first, Scott, actually, but it is a really good example of the role that the media plays in the award of impunity to politicians. And so if you are of the left, or if you are progressive, if you are a party that is on the side of the people as opposed to wealth, then you as a politician will come in for levels of abuse and scrutiny that the right wing can not even begin to imagine. Who would be the best Labour MP to cite as a parallel to Michelle Donelan in this case? If a Labour MP had accused a Tory, or had accused anybody, in fact, of supporting Hamas, and then used 15 grand of public money to get off the hook, it would be page 1, 2 and 3 of the Daily Mail. 4 minutes after 11, just knitting together some of the points made in the previous hour. Your credit where credit's due to everyone who's been in touch to say, no doubt the Taxpayers Alliance will be along in a minute in absolute outrage about Michelle Donelan's behaviour, Michelle Donelan's conduct. That, for the benefit of the tape, is sarcasm, by the way. I'm going to talk about money next. I'm haunted by something that we did on the show last week, and haunted in a good way, if there is such a thing. Do you remember when we said meaningful contributions? Give me a ring and make a meaningful contribution. It's sort of a reason why some days I decide that's a really big story, that's a really important issue, but I don't know that we can talk about it together. I don't know that we can have a conversation about it because I don't know what you'll say. I need to have some idea of what you will say in order to derive some confidence in the attempt to turn a topic or a news item or an issue into a radio phone-in programme. So ideally, all I'd have to do is sit here and say, give me a ring and make a meaningful contribution. 0345 6060 973. And I'm haunted by that now, because if I can't think what a meaningful contribution looks like, I'm almost talking myself out of topics that I would once have just dived into with my eyes shut. Can we try that one day? Can we just try that one day? I'll say, here's a story, and I'll read you a couple of paragraphs, and then I'll say, give me a ring now and make a meaningful contribution. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. So here's the thing. I haven't got any meaningful contributions to make to analysis of yesterday's budget. I bit tongue-in-cheek when I talk about how hard I find it to understand a lot of what goes on in these matters. I'm not remotely tongue-in-cheek when I say that if it's a Tory budget, I, as a high earner and a high-rate taxpayer, I will come out of it better off than I went into it, and I did, inevitably, because say what you like about the Tories, if you're well off, you'll be even weller off by the time they've finished their budget. And of course, the definition of well off is changing, and this might be part of what we talk about next. The definition of well off moves upwards. So you might have felt well off in 2010. Oh, I wonder if that's the topic, actually. You might have fell off? You might have felt well off in 2010. But you don't feel well off now, even though you're doing the same job. I think that's it. By Jove, I think we've got it. Because there are two stories doing the rounds today. One you just heard in Thomas's bulletin about public spending. I'm more interested perhaps in the Resolution Foundation's crunching of the numbers that shows that your wages, the average wage, will not regain its 2008 level until 2026. That's the Resolution Foundation. The Institute for Fiscal Studies, meanwhile, a leading economic research group, has said that the the conspiracy of silence, really, between all the parties, between Labour and Tory, over tax and spending choices is going to harm us all. The next Parliament will be the most difficult, possibly, of any in 80 years for any Chancellor trying to bring down debt. So they're really good examples, actually, of my problem on budget days or budget the day after budget days. Because I can't turn that into a phone-in, can I? The Institute for Fiscal Studies says the next Parliament could well prove to be the most difficult of any in 80 years for a Chancellor wanting to bring debt down. It's too dry. It's really, really important, but what would a meaningful contribution sound like? This isn't one of those tongue-in-cheek challenges, by the way, where I'm saying no one would ring me and then I expect everyone to ring me and then I pat myself on the back for being such a brilliant presenter because I can turn base metal into radio gold. It really isn't. No one would ring me, and if you did ring me, you wouldn't be very interesting. No offence. But how can anyone make a meaningful contribution to a conversation about a conspiracy of silence involving the main parties over tax and spending choices? Answer, you can't. That's good. James in Keighley said the Well-Offington window. So you're right. The Well-Offington window is moving all the time. The definition of well-off, I think, in 2024 is profoundly different from what it was in 2010. And one of the best ways to highlight that is the fact that you've got the same job. The problem I've got in getting you to ring me is that you are not somebody who rings radio stations to describe yourself as being on the wrong end of wealth distribution, or you are not previously the sort of person to ring a radio station to describe yourself as being on the wrong end of wealth distribution. This is why I'm so baffled that the Tories are still getting 20% in the polls, because it seems to me that the people who are being fiscally alienated are the people who see themselves as fiscally conservative. And you have been more royally screwed, arguably, than anybody else in society except the ill and the unemployed. So 20 years of lost pay growth. What you can tell me is what that means, right? What that means. Billy makes a great point. Imagine if Gary Lineker had been tweeting stuff. Now, what's the opposite of supporting Hamas? I'm not even sure. But imagine if Gary Lineker had been tweeting stuff like that, what the right-wing media would be doing with a television presenter's Twitter account while they remain close to silent about an actual Secretary of State. Extraordinary. But I'm being distracted by your texts. I don't know whether you're listening on catch-up. I'm getting that quite a lot now. People listening on catch-up on Global Player, texting me as if it were live, and then I respond to it live, even though we're not talking about the topic that you're listening to, and we haven't been doing so for the best part of 20 minutes, or sometimes up to 2 hours. The meaningful contribution to this conversation would be what it actually means. So that is a dry headline, right? The UK faces nearly 20 years of lost pay growth. A think tank which focuses on low and middle earners says, and I use the word think tank, in this case it's a transparently funded organisation dedicated to the public good. It's such a shame that we haven't got a better phrase to describe secretly funded organisations dedicated to the interests of epic wealth, because at the moment they both get called think tanks. It's the BBC has to take a lead on that. There's not much point me doing it. But the average wage will not regain its 2008 level until 2026. And that's not just the number, it's the relationship between income and outgoing. So from the financial crisis, for the entire duration of the last 3 or 4 Conservative governments, you, particularly if you were in a middle or low income bracket, you have been worse off. You will have suffered, they argue, nearly 2 decades of lost pay growth. If your pay had continued to grow at the same pace that we saw before 2008, you'd be about £14,000 better off today. All right? Now that's too dry. So how are we going to do this together? Well, you can make suggestions if you want on how to bring this story alive, how to solicit meaningful contributions. I can't be a catchphrase now. It's far too much of a mouthful. James, meaningful contributions, O'Brien. I want you to tell me how you know that something's gone wrong economically. So low and middle income earners, the thing that means you know something's gone bonkers. If I tell you what I think it is, for me, you will laugh your head off. You could not have a better example of champagne socialism than the thing that I think of when I'm looking at the relationship between incomings and outgoings and how completely different it is from 25 years ago or 20 years ago. And I'll tell you what it is. It's school fees. Don't laugh. I appreciate that's a tiny, tiny proportion of the population. It's deeply rarefied. But my father sent me to public school and could just afford to do so. The school that he sent me to now, I don't think you get much change out of 50 grand a year. And remember, that's taxed income for most parents. That you would need to be earning, you'd need to be earning, I guess just give or take, you'd need to be earning about 100 grand before you've paid for anything else in order to send a child to the sort of school that I went to. So when I look for examples of, what do you call it, the narrowing at the top of the pyramid, the moving of the well-offication, the well-offerton window, I love that, I'm going to nick that from James, the well-offerton window, that's something that springs to mind for me. It's things that have moved beyond your reach. So your job has stayed the same, and I really need your help with this, because I know it's not easy to ring up, particularly if you're well off by most standards, and to ring off and sound like you're complaining. Yeah, I know you're not complaining. This is journalism. This is a search for case studies. Now imagine I'm walking up the high street, sticking a microphone in your gob, and asking you this question. Your job has stayed the same, more or less, right? Whether you're in exactly the same role or not, your job has more or less stayed the same. But what pay stagnation does is mean that things have moved out of your reach. And I think a really good way to explore this issue would be for you to tell me what has moved beyond your reach. And I have to choose my words quite carefully here, because I'm conscious of the world's tiniest violins, and I'm conscious of people listening to this program who are properly skint and properly poor, and who find this conversation almost luxurious in its contemplations. But it's really important. You can't talk about the economy from the perspective of exclusively the very rich or exclusively the very poor. Most of the economy is made up of the people in between those two positions. Almost all of the economy is made up of the people in between those two positions. And I think the best way I can think of to highlight 20 years of lost pay growth is to look at the things that you would not really have thought twice about buying 20 years ago that you are not sure you can buy today. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you understand what I mean? It's because the cost of things has risen where your wages have not. The most obvious relationship is the one between inflation and pay rises. But the conclusion of the Resolution Foundation is that we have been suffering 20 years of lost pay growth, which leaves us thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds worse off. It could be a home. 20 years ago, think of it now, if you were on what you're on now and property prices are what they are now, would you be able to get on the property ladder? 20 years ago, when you were on what you were on then and property prices were what they were then, you could. So it can be retrospective. It's not just, I could afford it in 2008, but I can't afford it now. It's, I bought it in 2008, but I wouldn't, that's it. I wouldn't be able to buy it now. Sometimes I really do need your help. Quite a few of you getting in touch to say, James, it's property. Think about property. So tell me about the property. It's how do you prove to a Tory, how do you prove to the editor, for example, of, let's just find out how pathetic it was today. How do you prove to the editor of the Daily Express, Britain ready for takeoff, or the editor of the Daily Mail, will it be enough to see off Labour, or the editor of the Telegraph, the end of national insurance? How do you prove to these idiots? I apologise. No, I don't. How do you prove to these idiots how much things have changed? So you could do something 20 years ago. You're in more or less the same income bracket compared to everybody else. You haven't been made CEO, but you couldn't do it now. All right? I don't know whether I should say this because I don't want people to ring in. If the call's not up to sniff, it won't get on. But if you do call now, you will get through, which is probably the last time I'll say that today, because it's mystery hour at 12, and frankly, I don't even need to say the phone number for an hour. So I just want help in understanding the relationship between wages and spending, and the best way of doing it is to highlight what you could have done 20 years ago on your income, but you couldn't do it now, despite the fact you're doing the same job. All right? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And I stress, I do need your help with this, because I have run out of meaningful contributions. 21 after 11, Tim says, why not compare the experiences of young people who had a young child then and have a young child now? That's really interesting, actually, isn't it? Because, albeit you're in Poitiers, Tim, I noticed from your WhatsApp, so clearly you, like me, are more of an observer on this issue than a participant. But that's a really interesting comparison. I wonder, there won't be that many, and as Tim points out, you're more likely to be a dad than a mum if you had a newborn in 2008 and you've got a newborn in 2024. The difference in experience, the difference in the relationship between incomings and outgoings. That's what I'm looking for. This is really strong as well, from Duncan. I've worked in the same role for nearly 20 years. Last year, I was digging through some old pay slips. In 10 years, my salary has not changed. I'm lucky enough to have my own home, but if I was looking now, we would not be able to buy a house in the same town. We now can't afford the holidays that we would have gone on 10 years ago, and I can't afford to go to the pub or out for meals. We can't afford the, quotes, luxuries, end quotes, that were once not luxuries. Thank you. That's from Duncan in Devon. That's what I'm looking for. That to make this story alive, to make it real, to make it human, it needs to be about you. Because a headline that says the UK faces nearly 20 years of lost pay growth, a think tank which focuses on lower middle earners says, doesn't land in quite the same way. Ellis is in Bishop Stortford. Ellis, what would you like to say?
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for taking my call.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. I was just comparing to when I had my first job in Hoxton in Hackney.
Yes.
I was earning firstly about £8.80 an hour. Then it went to £11 an hour at the local leisure centre. And that was back in 1996. I'm comparing that to my sons now.
Yeah.
My eldest son worked at the local surgery, GP surgery here in Bishop Stortford, who take on 16-year-olds because they're faster on the computers to get the data in.
Seems legit.
Yeah. And he, I believe, was earning around, first of all, £8.20 because he was only 16. And it has probably gone up to about £8.70. I was 15 at the time when I was working for Hackney Leisure Services. And I can't really fathom out how that works, that your first job...
25 years difference. And in
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not even that the wage increases have lagged behind inflation.
No.
There have been no wage increases at all, effectively.
At all. Yeah.
What does it mean, Ellis? Tell me the difference between what you could do with your income then and what he can do with his income now, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, no, I can. I used to actually help my parents out. I used to go to, I'm a bit of a food snob at the time as well, and I used to go to Marks and Spencer's, fill up 2 bags and go home with it. And that was the difference. And probably my son would go and get a meal deal probably with that for himself only.
No, I mean it's a little thing, but you're making the point about having disposable income. It's a bit like our friend in Devon talking about what once seemed to be I don't want to say necessities, but they weren't luxuries, so they were just normal things to do.
Yeah.
Like going to the pub or going out for a meal, but now they feel like luxuries. I presume for your lad, going out on the lash is almost out of reach financially, whereas for you in Hoxton back in the day, you were probably living it up every Friday night.
Well, absolutely. And also, for example, he's now gone off to university, and there's all this talk about university students not going out, the clubs all closing down. You know, my son is in his room every night.
Yeah, do you know, you just took the words out of my mouth. We nearly did that last week, the nightlife story. And probably we should have done, because do you know what I was doing in my ivory tower? I was thinking, I wonder how young people have changed. I wonder if it's because of streaming services. They're less likely to want to, perhaps they're more introverted. Perhaps lockdown has changed their social habits. Whereas actually, the big reason is probably, we're not going out because we haven't got any money.
No, absolutely.
We simply can't afford it.
Yeah, definitely.
There it is. There it is.
Income.
20 years of lost pay growth. I mean, not even lost pay growth in the parallel you draw, albeit between two different jobs, but similar status. And the numbers have barely moved at all. Tommy's in Liverpool. Tommy, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah,
hello, mate.
What it is, my partner and I went on holiday 2003 to New York. Had 5 days in New York. And back then, I was on a lot less than what I was in, and now my partner was on a lot less. She was in a different job, actually, than what she's in now.
Okay.
And it was affordable. It was easy. It was just a case of booking it, let's go, let's save up for a couple of months for our spending money. And now, and in between then and now, we've been to Florida 3 times with the children.
Right.
And now we've gone from living and seeing the world and giving our children all these great experiences to just existing. We don't live. We get up. I haven't worked myself since 2022.
Right.
Since post COVID, and I've had long COVID ever since. I've lost a 25-year job that I had. I've been unable to work, and we don't live. We exist, and our children, they see that, and it's just. There's just no. I don't think people realise that we've gone from having a good life, and I'm not just talking about myself. Obviously, millions of people across the country to having no life.
I mean, your circumstances are a bit different, aren't they? Because you can't work anymore. So there's going to be an inevitable knockback on your what you can afford and what you can't afford. But I presume even before you lost your job, things were nowhere near as comfortable as they were when you were flying out to New York for a 5-day break.
The last time we went to Florida was 2018, and ever since then, ever since 2019, Brexit, I think it's changed the world. It's changed the way we live our lives, the prices that we have to pay for things. And, we went in the shop a couple of days ago, and one of the items that we always buy, it's gone up by 36% overnight.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
How can they do it? How can they justify doing it? We all know these places, the supermarkets, they buy in bulk. They buy what you see on the shelf was probably bought weeks, if not months before, in the dry goods.
Yes.
And they're putting the prices up for the only reason that I can see is that they feel like it. The
only circumstances in which they won't do that, or the only circumstances in which prices will come down, is when they're not making enough profit, i.e. not enough people are buying it. What you describe in simple terms is crippling for ordinary families. And yet there wasn't much in yesterday's budget from Jeremy Hunt that seemed to recognise that. Another minimal cut in national insurance is not going to make a difference for most people when it comes to what they can and can't afford as they do their weekly shop. A lot of people, thank you, Tommy. That's a really good example, actually. I haven't got this word quite right on... someone else will tell me. It's not the opposite of luxury, because the opposite of luxury traditionally is necessity. But it didn't feel like a treat, I suppose. We could go for a treat, can we? Going out for a meal, that's a treat, right? It's not, I mean, if you can afford to go out for a meal every night, you probably don't. It's still a treat when you do. But if your decision is based on what you can afford, then going out for a meal, going on a slightly fancy holiday, it's only 5 nights, but it's still New York, it's not Bognor. That's the thing that needs to be pinned down in this reporting, isn't it? And they're the little things. The big things, obviously, are houses, property. It's coming up to 11:30. I thought it would be responsible to find out a little more about that memorial that Jeremy Hunt announced yesterday to commemorate I was only looking at the World War II figures, which run to about 1.5 million Muslims killed in action fighting on the Allied side of the war. So I want to find out a little bit more about the organisation behind that memorial, because I think someone has to recognise that a sacrifice in defence of our values, particularly when fighting against the Nazis, shouldn't somehow be diminished when it turns out that the fallen soldier is a Muslim. But that, sadly, is the direction of traffic in some corners of the British media and inevitably social media this morning. So once again, we will do our best, as we did with the RNLI yesterday, We will do our best to push back against the bile. After the very latest headlines with Thomas Watts. It is 26 minutes to 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I do find myself thinking sometimes, particularly when the political atmosphere is a little febrile, as it has been in the last couple of weeks, the last month or so, of Jo Cox's maiden speech in the House of Commons in 2015 and that quote that she is remembered for by many of us. We are far more united and have far more in common than that which divides us. And Jeremy Hunt did something yesterday. I love Martin Lewis. Martin Lewis receiving criticism for praising some of the things that Jeremy Hunt announced in his budget yesterday. But of course, it shouldn't matter who's saying things. If they say good things, regardless of the colour of the scarf tied around their neck or the badge that they're wearing politically, if they do good things, if they introduce good policies, you have to call them good policies. The alternative is a sort of ridiculous tribalism. And thinking of Jo Cox's words and looking at the efforts of people like 30p Lee Anderson to bring Islamophobia even further into mainstream public discourse than it has come already, I found Jeremy Hunt's announcement about a World War memorial for Muslim soldiers who fought and died in both world wars incredibly timely. A victory for Sajid Javid as well, who'd put pressure on the Chancellor or sought support from the Chancellor for a plan to properly commemorate Muslim soldiers from the Indian subcontinent, the Middle East, North Africa, who fought and in many cases died with the Allies in both world wars. It is a consequence in large part, or possibly entirely, of the work of the World Wars Muslim Memorial Trust, which has been around, I think, for just under a decade, and which is currently chaired by Sir William Blackburn, who joins us now. So, Sir William, thank you for your time. What is the reasoning behind the need for a specific memorial in this way?
Well, quite simply, that there isn't such a memorial anywhere at the moment which commemorates what the Muslims from the subcontinent contributed.
And the work to get one received a completely transformative boost yesterday.
It certainly did. I mean, we thought that there was a likelihood of some contribution from the government coming towards the memorial, but we certainly weren't expecting as much as the Chancellor announced. Which was £1 million. What form is £1 million? What form is the memorial set to take? Well, we have a wonderful design from our architect, Benedict O'Looney. It takes the form of a column or a minaret with a sort of low wall behind it on which we shall have inscriptions highlighting features of what Muslim soldiers and sailors contributed. That's going to be at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire, which is a wonderful 150-acre site full of memorials. And I recommend anyone to visit it. It's a simply inspirational place.
Yes, it is. I've been there. I mean, it's a magical place, actually, not to sound hyperbolic. Tell me a little about the importance of this historically. You probably heard my introduction and a reference to some political attempts to poison the well, as it were, of public discourse, particularly with reference to Muslims and the supposed differences between us, the attempts to sow division. I won't give any publicity to people who were already attacking Jeremy Hunt's announcement yesterday. My listeners are bright enough to work out who's likely to be on that list. But the importance of this for the future is in many ways, Sir William, as important as what it says about the past.
Well, we have found that there are a great many British Muslims who know nothing about what their forebears contributed to the United Kingdom of today. They know little or nothing about what their grandfathers and great-grandfathers did in the two world wars. And I think some of them probably feel somewhat separate from what Britain today is. So this memorial will not only commemorate what their forebears did, but also, I hope, educate British Muslims and the wider community in what they contributed and how they are part of the Britain of today.
How did you personally get involved in this project? Why does it mean something to you personally, if I may ask?
Well, the person whose idea the memorial was, Tazi Hussain, I happen to know, and I also happen to have had a small involvement in the construction of the Bomber Command Memorial in Green Park. So he approached me, and I was only too happy to get involved. Sadly, he died, and I found myself as chairman of the trust in his place.
Your work's now almost complete, is it? Well, I mean, the money's in place, the construction will go ahead, and the next time we speak will probably be at the inauguration.
Well, I hope so. We've, of course, we have the design which I mentioned. We have the site at the National Memorial Arboretum. We've done an enormous amount of work in preparing for this. We have all sorts of reports and investigations and things. All we need is the money. And the money now seems to be forthcoming. So on that basis, there's nothing to stop us from proceeding.
What a lovely story. Final question. What's the sort of ETA, do we think?
Well, now that the government's made its announcement, I hope we can get something up by the end of the year.
Good Lord, really? That quickly?
Well, we have the consents, we have planning consent. I mean, it rather depends on the civil servants, because, as you would expect, if the government's making money available, they want to exercise quite a lot of diligence on what happens and how it's spent. So we're prepared for that.
Well, I look forward to seeing it. Sir William Blackburn, many thanks for your time today, the chair of the World Wars Muslim Memorial Trust, which received news from the Chancellor yesterday that £1 million would be made available to honour all of the Muslim soldiers from the Indian subcontinent, the Middle East and North Africa who fought and in many cases died in defence of the Allies, in defence of Britain as well, of course. That's why the memorial is going to be here. And I make no apology for bringing it to your attention that some people, incredibly easy to predict who, are trying to use this to create negativity, trying to use the sacrifice of fallen soldiers to create negativity, to create controversy, to whip up complaint. And, of course, possibly relying on the fact that their own followers and supporters will be unable to remember that they're supposed to be on the side of the armed forces, particularly the fallen. And if you've never been there, it's both world wars, by the way. If you've never been there to the Arboretum in Staffordshire, I mean, it is extraordinary. I don't like the word magical because it's illogical, but there are some spaces, liminal, I think is a good word to describe them, where you do feel that you're somehow detached from the daily grind. You remove yourself from the quotidian and move into a place of contemplation, and that is very, very much one of those. It is 11:41. Mystery Hour is just around the corner. Before that, more evidence of this. A lot of people talking about the difference between living and patronising. Ben is in Kent. Ben, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Big fan of the show.
Thank you, mate.
So our weekly shopping budget before pre-COVID, I'd say around 2018, was £65 a week. Just me and my wife.
Yeah.
That is now £100 all day long.
That's it, isn't it? And your circumstances from the outside looking in haven't changed.
They've not changed, and obviously as a result, we struggle a little bit more.
Yeah.
To be honest, taking a holiday now has to be something that has to be planned and considered very carefully, because we just do not have the expenditure that we used to have.
And we've been boiled like frogs, right? You know that analogy about, because if they'd announced this overnight, if this had been the consequence of one budget, I don't know that we'd have taken to the streets, but goodness me, it would probably have changed the results of the last few elections. But it's happened incrementally. It's a sort of slow chipping away until one day you wake up, make a comparison like the one you've just made, going back over 12 years, and you suddenly realise that somehow you've been skinned.
Absolutely. It really does feel like since 2009, It feels like the working class are being booted down, kept down, and it really is. For a working man, the working class, it's really becoming a struggle, an actual struggle.
I think you make a brilliant point, and we need to probably rethink what we mean by the working class and redefine it as people who literally need to work to live, people who are not living off wealth, people who are not living off investments or off income that comes from, capital. They are literally needing to, and that's almost all of us. It's certainly going to be almost everybody listening to this programme. And I don't know if you've listened to my podcast this week with Gary Stevenson, Ben, talking about the redistribution of wealth and the move from the shift of money from people like you and like me into the pockets of people who already had more than Croesus to start with, and the sense that is a conspiracy theory or not backed up by the evidence is is disappearing. And there it is. So I don't like the word normal in the context of these kind of conversations. It's a political word, isn't it? A normal. What's an abnormal taxpayer or a normal working person? What's an abnormal working person? I don't even like the word ordinary, but I don't know what words work better. Working people, by which we simply mean people who couldn't meet their bills at the end of, if not this month, then next month, and if not next month, then the month after that. Your current arrangements are such that if you didn't have the income that comes from working, you would fall. That's the working class in 2024. Has been for some time, actually, but we still cling to these curious and often outdated notions. If you are in that class, the class of people who do not have enough capital to live on, sound like Jane Austen now, then you have had a nightmare in the last. Gary takes it back to Ben takes it back to 2009. The Resolution Foundation takes it back to 2008. It doesn't really matter which you do. And how has it happened? Well, there's a book I could recommend. 11:49 is the time. This is beautifully put, poetically put, actually. The little joys in life, right, Sam? The travel, the experiences, the amenities, the tasty food. They've turned us into a captive consumer base, a profitable factory farm monopoly of supermarket supremacy, squeezing everything, including the squeak, out of the livestock. It's no wonder everyone's gloomy and mental ill health levels are rocketing. And that is a response to the story about the UK facing nearly 20 years of lost pay growth. A think tank which focuses on low and middle earners has said this morning in the aftermath of Jeremy Hunt's budget yesterday. Seems a timely moment just to remember that Nadeem Zahawi once put the heating bill for his stables on parliamentary expenses. He talked a lot about impunity in the first hour. And we also talk quite a lot about racism on this programme, even when we worry perhaps it's a word we reach for too quickly. But talking to Sir William there about the memorial to be built to Muslim soldiers who fought and died in both world wars on the side of the Allies, how racist would you have to have a problem with that, do you think? It's extraordinary, isn't it? The people trying to turn that into a negative, turn that into a bad thing. They, of course, know exactly what they're doing. But how racist would you have a problem with that? And I mention it because that's why it's happening. It's precisely because of the collapse in the relationship between pay and spending. It's precisely because we've had 20 years of lost pay growth. The people responsible for it need now some fairly serious culture war, don't they? I mean, you're looking at the people who've been in power for 14 years, and you're looking at some of the stuff we've been discussing on the programme in this hour. The things you can't afford anymore, the things that you can't afford compared to what your parents could afford, the things that you can't afford compared to what you could afford just 10, 15, 20 years ago. And the people who've got richer throughout, the people who fund the Tory party, the people who get PPE contracts, the people who get seats in the House of Lords, the people whose interests are served by the secretly funded think tanks, by the right-wing newspapers, they've got richer and richer and richer. The numbers are inarguable. This isn't an opinion, this is counting. A tiny, tiny proportion at the very, very, very pinnacle of the pyramid have got richer and richer and richer, and everybody else has got poorer. So what the hell are you going to do to avoid the sort of reaction and response to that inequality that is both natural and in some ways inevitable? Answer, you've got to turn us against each other. You've got to turn us against each other. And only in that context is it possible to understand how people who normally claim to be both patriotic and great supporters of the armed services can be whipped up to object to a memorial to dead soldiers, a memorial to Allied soldiers. That's important, I think, sometimes to knit those things together. Back to the bigger question of cost of living versus income. Natalie's in... are you in Fakenham or Thacum?
Thacum.
Where's that?
It's in West Sussex.
Okay, I've not heard of
So
that. I thought someone had just spelt Fakenham appallingly badly, but it shows that I'm in the wrong on this one. What would you like to say, Natalie? What made you pick up the phone?
Well, to be honest, I agree with all of the callers thus far with what they've said. Obviously, it's inarguable with most of their...
It is. It's just life. It's just normal life, isn't it, that we're describing? And it shouldn't really be newsworthy, but it is.
Yeah, but for me, the major thing is a house. Yes. So I have a young family, so two girls, and I'm actually on maternity leave at the moment, and we just simply can't afford a house. just a house to house the size family that we have. And I compare it to my parents, where it was only my dad who was working when we were young children. I'm one of three daughters. And he was on a good salary in London. He used to commute there every day. And mine and my partner's salary combined is far higher than my dad's salary of the day. And we can't afford to buy.
And it's probably higher in real terms as well, not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of the amount of money coming in, even after the figures have been adjusted for the difference in time, is probably higher. But it just doesn't touch the sides of what you'd need to get onto the property ladder.
Yeah, exactly.
It's mad, isn't it?
It's even in terms of just childcare. So as I said, we're both, full-time working parents, except I'm on maternity leave at the moment. Yes. But I'm considering cutting my maternity leave by half just to be able to afford the bills.
To get back in the swing, to get back in the game. And so that's a diminishment of your quality of life and arguably your children's as well, although I don't want to criticise any parent who chooses not to take parental leave. It shouldn't be a luxury. It should be a right. You could describe it as a privilege, I suppose, but not a luxury. It's a choice. It's two doors. You choose which one you go through, but the choice is taken away from you by circumstance. Natalie, thank you. That's the big one, isn't it? The housing. Incredible, really, to think that we've just allowed it to unfold, really, without. Well, I don't know if we've allowed it. Again, do you know, actually, when I said at the end of the last junction, there's a book I could recommend. I bet you thought I meant my own, didn't you? I didn't. I meant Gary Stevenson's book, The Trading Game. I just listen, nobody knows everything, but he has insights into how things work that are really, really interesting. And the accumulation of wealth, that thing I've been obsessed with for years, the tininess of the pinnacle at the very top of the pyramid and the way all the money is moving upwards towards it. A combination of Gary Stevenson and Bernie Sanders on the last two full disclosures. A real eye-opener. A lot of you have got in touch to tell me that. So it was his book I was recommending. Stick that in your pipe and smoke it. I wasn't recommending my own book for once. Andy's in Cromer. Andy, what would you like to say?
Hello, mate. Yeah. Well, I'm kind of the other side of the window to Natalie, who you just had on.
So you got in there just in the nick of time.
Well, I'm actually going back a little bit further.
Okay.
Me and my wife bought our house in 1996, and I was earning about £20,000 a year.
Yeah.
We paid £45,000 for our house.
Yeah.
And our next door neighbours, who've got the mirror, because it's a semi-detached, so they've got the mirror of our house, as it were. They've just put it on the market, their house, for £280,000.
Right.
Now, my wages now are in the ballpark of £50,000 a year.
That's it. That's a perfect. So the property is 6 times what you're earning, and when you bought it, it was 2.5 times.
Yeah, and I'm not working for the same employer, but I'm doing the same job. I'm a tramping lorry driver.
Yeah.
So, and now the following year, 1997, we had our first child, and my wife gave up work, and she'd not gone back to work at all. She sort of worked part-time, but at the time, for about 10 years, she didn't work at all. And we could support, I was able to support our family, pay a mortgage. We used to go to Centre Parks once a year with the kids when there's little, all on my one income.
Which one, Thetford?
Yes, Elvedon, yeah. And you didn't have to go too far.
No, I was about to say, I suppose it's a busman's holiday for you, having to drive too far, isn't it, when you're having a break? Yeah. You don't want to do that. And this is it. You're not living like the life of Riley or anything like that, but the way Emma put it, just the little joys in life, and they've just been squeezed out. And of course, you've got that equity now. You've got that house, and you'll be able to pass some of it on to your children, and and the gap grows for the people who haven't been able to get onto the ladder and are going to be paying rent until for the rest of their lives.
Well, this is sort of the position my own children are now in, because they're young adults, and listening to Natalie explaining her position, she's basically. I mean, none of my children have got children of their own children yet, but she's in the position. She's probably in their sort of age bracket, mid-20s, late 20s. She's, like I say, she's the other side of the window, as it were,
It is there, and yet here we are all on, just sort of cracking on with it and thinking that there's no alternative, thinking that there's no choice. Andy, thank you. I'm just trying to imagine. I've said it before, and people thought I was exaggerating, but I would not. Now, what I was on when I was 28, when we got on the property market, we would not have been able to get onto the property market. And that in many ways changes everything. It's coming up to 12 o'clock. It's Thursday. You know what that means. Mystery Hour is on the horizon. Your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. I'll squeeze in one more. I think Martin in Weybridge before we hit the news. Martin, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Martin.
I'm going back a little bit further than 20 years. I'm going back to the mid-90s when I was in my mid-30s. I worked as a national sales manager for a company. My wife was a teacher in a private school. Decent jobs.
Yeah.
Reasonably good money for the time. My salary was about $35,000. My wife's was about $25,000.
Right.
We were able to buy a detached home here in Weybridge.
Gosh.
It cost us £300,000.
Right.
We squeezed on the mortgage. It was tough.
Sure.
Our daughter was in the private school. So we bought the house. Our daughter was in the private school. The jobs today, the national sales manager, £60,000 a year, maybe tops. I'm now retired.
You're not getting anywhere near Weybridge, are you, Martin, on that kind of money?
My wife teaching today, the salary about £55,000 a year.
Yeah.
The house. We were going on 2 foreign holidays a year too. The house we bought today, $1.5 million.
It's madness.
How does it stack up?
It doesn't. How did it happen? When did you notice? Do you sit back and go? I mean, I think most people, we don't stop for long enough to notice, do we? Sometimes.
I know. And of course, my daughter's now in her mid-30s. Her and her partner are both in good jobs. He works in IT. She's a senior social worker.
Right.
They can't afford a house in Weybridge.
No, of course not.
You know, they need £1 million to buy anything that's reasonably good.
I mean, you highlight it perfectly, and you brought it in more or less on time. But that's it. That's the bit. I don't know what the next chapter in this story is. I don't know whether it is a sort of national reversal to a more feudal structure. Because of course what happens next rhetorically is either we all start biting chunks out of each other, we have a proper redistribution of wealth, or that rhetoric of, well, if you won't do it, then someone else will takes over, and you have a genuine underclass, a genuine class of people, an entire section of society with absolutely nothing. And the fear of ending up there propels you to put up with what we are describing here. And history doesn't teach us much on this. There are various roads that we could go down. But, I think we all know which one we should be travelling.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
4 minutes after 12, Thursday, Mystery Hour. What a happy relief. Your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. We've also got, of course, the opportunity to win your own Mystery Hour board game. Incredibly fun. And a gift from me to you if you are responsible for the finest contribution of the week. My decision is final. I am, in this context, the management, and you can find the full terms and conditions at lbc.co.uk. Otherwise, you can buy it, actually. I'll tell you how you can get hold of your own copy shortly. But before all of that, I need to remind you how this works. Someone rings in with a question and someone else rings in with an answer. Somehow, that relatively simple premise, coupled with my natural gift for banter, creates an environment in which magic can happen. We had one of my favourite Ray Liotta's of all time last week. In fact, it's such a favourite, I've still got my dog whistle with me. That does it, I think. Did we cover everything? Terms and conditions, get it. mysteryhour.co.uk if you want to get your hand on the game. If you're not quite sure what I'm blabbering on about at the moment, then just stay tuned. All will become clear. All I would say, if you are new to the programme, is that, or this feature of the programme, is it's not really like the other 14 hours of the week that we spend together. Shall we crack on? Yes, we shall. I've done that. I've said terms and conditions at LBC. I've done this before. Ollie's in Exeter. Ollie, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Ollie.
The other week you mentioned your rucksack.
Did I?
Passing.
What, my new one?
Oh, I don't know if it was new or the old one.
Well, I've got a new one.
Oh.
It's very nice. It's by a company called Troubadour. I don't know if you've come across them. It's very recyclable. It's so recyclable that I think I understood correctly, Ollie. It's got a sort of permanent guarantee on it.
Wow.
Isn't that nice? Anyway, I digress.
What's the ruck that you use your sack for?
Pardon? I know.
It's a rucksack.
It is a rucksack. I know this.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. And so would you if you had the German. You haven't got the German, have you?
I have not.
If you had the German, you would know.
Oh.
So, ruck in German is back.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh.
So it is.
My daughter. Sorry.
No, you carry on.
My daughter was in America recently, and she went to reception to get her rucksack.
Yes.
And the guy had no idea what she meant. He goes, "What's a rucksack, Mom?"
Welsh, was he? Sorry. I do that joke every single time someone does an accent on the programme. However good it is. Backpack, is it in America? Backpack.
Everywhere else, I think.
Dora the
Speaks
Explorer.
English.
Except Germany. I bet it's a rucksack in Germany. So literally, rucksack is back sack.
Right.
So all that's missing is... Okay, no, nothing. I'm going to give myself a round of applause for that. Qualifications, I think someone's asked me before. Or do you know, I may even have looked it up when I bought my rucksack. Thank you, Ollie. Take care. 7 minutes after 12 is the time. Dora the Explorer, of course, responsible for backpack, and we won't go down the other little linguistic road that I opened up a moment ago. Dave's in Moulton. Dave, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on, mate.
Big fan, listen every day.
Thank you, mate.
Except for the past 2 days, and it's your fault.
Why, what's happened?
You put me on to Gary Stevenson.
So you've been... Well, this is the problem with me being so generous in my praise.
Oh, I know, yeah. I
well,
know.
Anyway, you're back now.
I've been listening to the audio book.
You're back now.
Anyway, back in the room.
Well, you're ruck now.
Yeah.
No, doesn't quite work. Rucken is the word for back. Rucken sacken, rucksack, back sack, and everybody's happy.
Rucked.
Carry on. Well done, Dave.
You know when you use nail scissors.
Yeah.
You know the ones that are curved at the end.
Yeah, I need a trim actually.
And when I use them with my right hand, I use the scissors in my right hand.
Yes.
On my left hand nails. I can cut them all right.
Yeah.
But when I use my left hand on the right hand nails, they all split and fray. It doesn't cut properly.
Yeah.
And it's a mystery because it's the same pair of blades.
Yeah, but you're right-handed.
It shouldn't matter, should it?
Of course it matters. It's a bit like saying when I write with my left hand, why is it all over the place? And when I write with my right hand, it looks all neat and tidy.
No, I'm fairly skilled. Skilled with both hands.
You're not, though, are you? You're not ambidextrous. If you were ambidextrous, you wouldn't have this problem.
No, I'm not bad. I'm not bad with both hands because I use a mouse with both hands.
Yeah, but you can't write. You can't. If I could, you go on to write bits now with both hands. I'll be able to tell which one is your right hand.
Well, I know, yeah, but you know.
Well, that's it. What do you think the answer is? You think, or you think they might be right-handed scissors?
No, I think it might be something to do with the curvature of the blade or the way,
that's what I mean.
The angle.
All right. Well, I have the same problem as you, and I use the clippers.
You have the same problem with clippers?
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's got nothing to do with the curvature of the... I use the clippers. You know the ones I mean? Where you fold up the arm and then you turn it... And I do... If I'm using my right hand, I can... In fact, you can probably tell...
Yeah.
No, you can't, actually. I might go for a manicure. Have you ever been for a manicure?
No, I haven't.
I think we should start going. We should be a bit more cosmopolitan, shouldn't we, Dave?
I think yeah.
I think a manicure might be.
Can't afford it, James.
Well, no, this is very true. Actually, that is a luxury.
Manicure's the first thing to go.
You should see the state of my feet, Dave. Honestly, that's how you can tell there's a cost of living crisis going on. And as Karen points out, you can't cut your nails with a mouse, Dave. So that doesn't really prove anything. But I use clippers, and it feels more comfortable doing my left hand with my right hand, and then I swap over, and it's because I'm 99% sure it's because you're right-handed, but I'm going to put it on the board. I'm going to put it on the board.
But it's the same blade.
I know, but it's the same clippers with me, and I'm worse with my left hand. It's like everything else. It's like playing snooker. Left-handed versus you're going to be worse, aren't you?
We'll have a go.
I'll put it there. All right. Why does Dave struggle to cut his nails? The nails on his right hand when he's using the scissors in his left hand. But it could be that the curvature, he's got some of those fancy scissors with the curved blades. Does anyone want to have a go at that? Mark's in Bromley. Mark, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on.
It's either genius or ridiculous.
Uh-oh.
Now, if I take a tumble,
yeah,
I've fallen over.
Yeah.
If my 87-year-old mum falls over or takes a tumble, she's had a fall.
Oh.
So what's the difference? What are the criteria? When does falling over become having a fall?
Well, I don't think that is ridiculous. I think that is a good question, but I think we know the answer.
Do we?
Yeah. I think it's when you can't get up without help.
Well, you see, yeah, maybe. So if I'm drunk and I fall over and I can't get up on my own, have I had a fall?
Yeah, but that's not. No, you can't start changing the parameters of the question.
I think I can.
I think you can't. Excuse me, who invented this game and all the rules? Was it you or was it me?
Well, it was you.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, okay. No, but you can't, because you could do that on everything. Because imagine if Dave changed his question then and said, oh, yeah, and I said, well, the reason why you cut your nails with your right hand and your left hand, and then he said, oh, yeah, but when I'm drunk, I chop my fingers off or something. Like, you can't just bring drunkenness into it as a qualifying state for a question. Someone who struggles to get back up again has a fall. You've had a fall if you struggle to get back up again.
Really?
It's got to be.
No, there's more to it than that.
Well, of course there isn't. I mean, there's nothing to it except that. I'll put it on the board, but they're not even technical. Well, you're welcome. But they're not even technical terms, are they? They're not medical terms.
I didn't say they were.
So who's going to be the judge then?
Well, I don't know. That's what I mean. It's either genius or ridiculous.
It's a nice question to which I provided.
Ridiculous,
it's not.
It's
really? It's a nice question to which I've provided an almost perfect answer, which you've turned your nose up at.
Yeah, that's because it's Mystery Hour, not Challenge O'Brien, isn't it?
Well, I think to be fair, no. Actually, we are thinking of a rebrand.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me at all.
I think you'll find the other 14 hours of the week a Challenge O'Brien, Mark. I like that. Falling over and having a fall. It's got to be something to do with the ease with which you get up. In fact, I very much doubt he's listening. But I met a lovely man yesterday who had a fall, and the arthritis in his knee was so bad he couldn't get back up again. And we were walking the dog, and we came around the corner, and for a moment I thought that I thought something worse had happened. I thought he'd had a heart attack or a stroke, and we obviously went to help him. I had to hoist him back up onto his feet. He said, I've just got arthritis so bad in my knee, I slipped over, I can't get back up again. So we got him back on his feet, and then I walked him to the bus stop. Just a lovely, lovely bloke. Brian, his name was. And you know little things, little interactions like that with people that you don't have ordinarily and you wouldn't have in normal circumstances. They have an effect upon you that is very hard to put into words. I guess that, that old good deed for the day phrase or whatever it might be, but putting other people at their ease, particularly when they're having a tough time of it, is one of the nicest things you can do, I think, in the course of the day. So in the highly unlikely event that Brian is listening to this, I did check that you'd got off all right from the bus stop. I nipped back and watched you get onto the bus, and I hope you've had a better day today than you had yesterday, mate. It's 12:15.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
18 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where Mystery Hour continues. Questions that still need answers. I've done the rucksack one. I'm pretty sure, Dave, there are left-handed scissors. Ergo, Dave's nails question isn't as interesting as mine. Because have you got left-handed clippers as well? How would that work? They're perfectly symmetrical. So that's just me, but that's me being right-handed. So obviously I'm going to wield my clippers better with my right hand than I am with my left hand. But Dave's got fancy scissors with a curved blade. So why is he shredding his fingernails on his right hand, but doing a lovely job like a professional manicurist on his left hand? What's the difference between falling over and having a fall? Is that it? I've only got 3 written down. He's like, oh, I should talk less, shouldn't I? Eileen is in Barnet. Eileen, question or answer?
It's an answer to Dave.
Carry on, Eileen. Come on.
It's because the scissors for left-handed are cut the blade is cut a different direction.
Right.
You have to buy special scissors, left-handed scissors, if you want left-handed scissors.
Qualifications?
I'm left-handed, and I've got some left-handed and right-handed scissors.
Why?
I can't answer that, James.
No,
Sorry.
well, that's why it's Michelle. Why have you got two? Why do you need?
I mean, to be honest,
Yeah.
I do.
Because you cut with both hands.
Yeah, I do laminating sometimes for my daughter for schoolwork for her.
Oh, nice.
And I bought some left-handed ones. Although I'm left-handed, I use my right hand always for doing cutting with scissors.
Can you describe to me the difference between the left-handed scissors and the right-handed scissors?
They look exactly the same, except the blade.
Yeah.
The blade that you cut with is cut by the makers the opposite direction.
I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means, Eileen.
No, and I can't describe it any other way. But when I went to a
But
shop...
don't both blades cut? Oh, it's the top blade and the bottom blade.
Yes, it's something to do with a blade on it. It's cut the opposite direction if it's for left-handed.
So it's different from just having them upside down. They need to be engineered differently, don't they?
You have to buy left-handed scissors, and I've got same pair. Looking at them, they look exactly the same, but there's a little label round one, and it shows a hand on it, and it shows you can't do it with your right hand.
Got
it's
it.
only for left-handed.
Well, I mean, you live and learn. So we know what's wrong with Dave then.
Yeah.
He's got right-handed scissors.
Yes.
But what's wrong with me? Because I use clippers.
I don't know anything about clippers because I don't use them.
Oh, all right.
So I can't
That's a bit
answer you on that
clippist.
one.
It's a bit clippist, Eileen. What have clippers ever done to you? You must be familiar with clippers. Clippers are completely symmetrical. There's no bias on the blades or anything. So
no, you could probably use them with either hand, probably.
well, I
don't
struggle
know.
though. I struggle with my. Anyway, you've got yourself a round of applause, Eileen.
Oh, thank you.
Look at that. Lovely stuff. Sam's in York. Sam, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
Just wondering what happens to your stomach when you go over a hump in the road and why it doesn't always affect everyone every time.
I mean, I don't know. Hopefully the answer to the first bit of the question will include the second bit because there are technically two questions there. But you mean that kind of, we call it your tummy turning over when we're children, don't we?
Yeah. It's one of those great simple pleasures in life, especially when your dad taxi and the kids around and you kind of know there's a dip coming up in the road, so you have a little grin to yourself, speed up a bit and wait for the woo.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's quite a pleasant feeling when you're a child. It's like being dizzy, isn't it? You think it's fun when you're a kid, and by the time you're an adult, it just makes you feel ill. It makes you want to have a sit down.
I've noticed it differs every time. They go over the same dip, and sometimes the kids are looking, sometimes they're not. Sometimes it catches them out, sometimes it doesn't. So it's not the same every time.
Maybe, your body might be telling you to prepare for it sometimes. I don't know. So we just want the physiological explanation of what's going on, and ideally a side order of why. It doesn't have any obvious evolutionary advantage, does it?
No, and it kind of differs whether you're in the front or the back when you're looking or not. Sometimes it catches you out, sometimes it doesn't.
You're on. What is going on when your tummy turns over? It's a humpback bridge is a good one for it, isn't it? It's a sort of up and down or a down and up rather than just a steep hill. It won't happen on. I don't remember. It happens on roller coasters. Does it happen on? I think it does. Sam, I like it. So we want to know what's happening when your tummy turns over, when you go over a humpback bridge. We want to know what the difference is between falling over and having a fall, although, frankly, Mark's scepticism notwithstanding, I think I knocked that one out of the park. Eileen certainly knocked Dave's question about nails out of the park, so we've done that. And the rucksack, quite a lot of you enjoyed that little exchange, although I think it may have gone over Ollie's head, which is just as well. But I do quite like the idea of people up and down the country shouting the word crack at the top of their voices for reasons that nobody around them would be able to understand. Thank you for getting in touch, particularly via WhatsApp, which you can, of course, 0345 606 0973, which you can, of course, use. So here's a question for you. Sorry, thank you, Sam. I'll get back to the phone in a minute. Here's a question for you. Someone has just texted the words Hugh Dalton to the programme. Now, either you have had Global Player on pause for a very long time, or your WhatsApp has gone doolally, or you've forgotten that you're listening to yesterday's programme, and we're actually now in the middle of today's programme. Because Hugh Dalton is the answer to a question I asked approximately this time yesterday, when Natasha Clark was with us. And I said, what was the name of that Chancellor who actually had to resign because he'd leaked some details of the budget to the London Evening Standard? And I thought his name was George. So I got loads of suggestions. They were all hilarious. George Formby, George Foreman, George and Mildred. It was actually Hugh Dalton. And so someone, and obviously you won't be able to hear me now. This is quite surreal. This is a bit like a kind of philosophical experiment. Someone's listening to yesterday's programme and sending in messages to yesterday's programme. And I'm currently presenting, if you hadn't noticed, today's programme. But I'm talking to them. This is like Star Trek or Red Dwarf or something. This is, God knows what's going to happen tomorrow. This is, woo. Although Stephen in Milton Keynes probably deserves a round of applause for this. Very cross. I did do a hook and tease yesterday and I forgot to give you the answer. Technically, it's not my job. It's my job to give you the answer, but I have at least 2 people on the team who are supposed to remind me when I say, I'll tell you after this, or I say, I'll let you know in a minute. I'm a lot better. And I'm sticking with it now. I'm sticking with it until I've actually changed on the inside. But I did forget yesterday. Ben in Exeter's just texted Hugh Dennis, which I think, but that came in at 12:24 as well. So it can't be a response to the Hugh. This is very weird. I didn't tell you how much a car costs extra. If you want to export a car to Canada, as a consequence of that brilliant trade deal Liz Truss signed and Kemi Badenoch is now bigging up, it's $3,000 per car, they reckon, on top of what you would have paid previously. So every export of a car to Canada, $3,000 more. So well done, everybody. And don't forget, please, that everybody knew exactly what they were voting for. Back to Mystery Hour. Ben's in Windsor. Ben, question or answer?
It's a question.
Carry on.
James. And forgive me, it's about as close to a motoring question as I think you'll let me get away with.
That's all right.
So if a tree grows in a sort of open area, obviously all the branches grow out from the trunk in an organic fashion, whereas drive down A roads, in sort of rural A roads, on the one side of the road, the other side of the road in the field, it's all sort of chaos and in there. But on the road, the branches seem to be aware of creating a space for vehicles, and they go over at lorry height, and there's no evidence of pruning. So my question is does a tree kind of feel the movement of air and sort of realise that it's a hostile environment for it to grow into that space where it would get hit
you
by.
See it more. You don't need to go on road. You don't travel by bus much, do you, Ben?
No.
Because if you're on the top deck of a double-decker bus, you see it really clearly.
With the plane trees in London.
Yeah, there's like almost an arch, half an arch, and it's not it's not mirrored on the other side of the tree at all. So,
exactly.
But doesn't that just answer your question?
Well, it's not pruned, so obviously, what's the tree? What's happening in the tree?
So it must just stop growing. I mean, it gets okay. So it definitely is happening. There's definitely a relationship between the bus and the tree.
Absolutely, but it's like what's making it get sort of tailored around the space that
because it's not growing up. Is it growing to a certain point and then because it's not being knocked off as such, is it?
No.
And sometimes it's actually quite scary. Sometimes when they do hit, No, and it does make quite a cracking noise. So it does. So maybe they are being. Well, I don't know. Are they being snapped off? Are they eroding them? Does it just stop growing past a certain point because it learns that there's no point?
And the lower branches on the roadside don't come out. They don't come out on that side.
Yeah. No, I think that's a brilliant question. We're flirting with the idea that trees are. I don't know if you. Yes. Have you read The Lord of the Rings?
Yes.
So Tolkien was ahead of the game on this one, wasn't he? Were they called Ents? E-N-T-S? I think comes up as a crossword clue quite a lot. They were the Ents. So the leaves get ripped off, probably.
And they feel that, obviously.
Well, we should find out. People are telling us this has come up before, Ben, which I don't worry about that. I've forgotten the answer, and it means that there probably is an answer. Otherwise, people wouldn't remember the question. So we shall find out what's going on with the trees. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Andy's in Mill Hill. Andy, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
Right. So I bought a African grey parrot about 5-6 months ago. Now, for the first
You're not bringing it back. You're not bringing it back, are you? Go on, sorry. Yes. For the first what?
It was a chick when we got it.
Okay.
And after about 2 months, it started whistling. Now, the two whistles that it was using were the sort of standard wolf whistle, and I'm not very good at whistling, so I'm not going to do it now.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the other one, when you're sort of calling someone over or trying to get their attention, you go... exactly those.
I've got my dog whistle with me here, but you won't be able to hear my dog whistle down the road. Well, you're not a dog, but even your dog won't be able to hear my dog whistle because of the kilohertz on the radio. Sorry, I'm going off a bit of a tangent. Carry on.
I'm thinking, where did it learn that? And then I spoke to a friend in the States who's got an African grey as well, and they said, well, my parrot does exactly the same thing. So I'm thinking, is it instinctive in the parrot, and we've learned from the parrot, or has the parrot learned from us?
Shut up.
Is that a weird one?
Well, the parrot started it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. How can we find an answer for that one?
Is
that too diverse and stupid?
It's one of my all-time favourite questions. I think it's a thing of beauty. I had no idea.
If you build it, they will come.
Thank you. I mean, what we're thinking is the chick's too small to have learnt it, and no one's whistled in front of it. Mm-hmm. And your mate in America's had the same experience.
Mm-hmm.
Does the parrot whistle like that naturally, in the same way that other birds do?
Exactly.
Which bird? Are you into birds, Andy?
Not really.
Well, why'd you buy a parrot then?
Because the wife liked it. I mean...
Because I've got one. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I'm late for the news already, but I've got an app to record birdsong, and I love it. And I'm a bit of an anorak with it. But because we live near the flight path, there's one near us that goes like this. It goes... And I can't...
Are they the green ones?
It's not a parakeet. It's not a parakeet. Well, I don't think it is. And I've tried, and I cannot for the life of me get the little beggar on tape because of the planes going overhead, and actually because of the parakeets round our way as well, going. Yeah. But what came first, the parrot or the wolf?
There we go.
I shall try and find out for you. I like that one a lot. I know it was your wife's idea in the first place, but have you grown close to the parrot?
I love it. It loves me but hates her.
Oh, perfect, mate. That's absolutely perfect. 12:31 is the time. Amelia Cox has your headlines.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
12:35 is the time, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Quite a few questions still need answers. Andy's parrot, Ben's tree, Sam's tummy, and Mark's falling over. All on the board. Charles is in Sidmouth. Charles, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
So it's about what happens into your tummy when you go over a humpback bridge.
Oh, yes.
And I would like to liken this to, on a mini scale, to the training that the astronauts get when they go in a jet and they are flown in a hyperbolic curve and they experience weightlessness for a short period of time.
So I gather.
And then when they come out of the curve, they'll get increased G. So when we're going over that humpback bridge, we're getting 0 G, i.e. weightlessness, for about half a second.
If that.
And then as you come out of it, you'll get increased G, maybe 2 G for another half of a second. So how will your organs react? Well, I am a doctor, though I'm not a specialist in this area. But definitely, when you're driving along on the flat, you've got 1 G, and if you suddenly go to 0 G, yes, things will move up because the gravity isn't holding them down anymore. And then when you come out of it, they will go down again. There will be a certain amount of movement.
So it's the suddenness of it. That's why it would happen on a humpback bridge, but not on a much steeper hill or a much longer gradient.
A longer gradient wouldn't do anything. It has to be kind of hyperbolic. It has to be, but you can have it on any scale. The NASA astronauts are training have got it on a very big scale, so they may be weightless for, say, 5 minutes. Whereas going over our humpback bridge, it's only going to be a moment, a short moment.
Well, there you go. And your qualifications are just your medical qualifications. You don't have any particular interest in G-force?
No, none at all.
It's a perfect answer, Charles. Thank you so much.
All right, no problem.
A round of applause for Dr. Charles, please. How about that? So it's G-force. Man, that's cool, isn't it? Dean's in Shoreham. Dean, question or answer?
Good afternoon, James. I have a question.
Carry on, Dean.
I was watching the football on Tuesday night, and at the end of the game, it was about 10 o'clock at night by this time.
Yeah, you weren't at Woking, were you?
I wasn't. This was Ipswich v Bristol
I can tell by your cheery mood. Go on.
One of the players on the post-match interview accidentally swore. Not major swear word, but a mild swear word. And the interviewer immediately was like, very sorry about that. I hope, if anyone was offended, and the usual.
Was it a B word? Was it a B word?
It was.
Okay.
Yes, slang for genitalia, should we say?
Okay. No, that is quite interesting. Okay, go on.
And my question is that it's 10 o'clock, it's after the watershed. Had someone on a TV channel, I don't know, BBC Two, ITV, whatever, said that word,
yes,
it would be, it'd be acceptable because it's after
in a
the
drama. If it had happened in a drama, it wouldn't have caused any problems.
Yeah, or a comedy show or something like that. So my question is, what's the difference between broadcasting rules in sport and in entertainment that mean that you can say a word on a comedy show, but you can't say that word in a sports interview at the same time of evening?
What was he using it as a qualitative judgment on something that had happened, or was he talking about his testicles?
He was talking about how he'd worked his little socks off, shall we say.
Yes, okay.
In that context.
I think that the presenter was being cautious. And that no one would have got into any trouble for that anyway, but that we have an almost reflex action as professional broadcasters to any use of profane language. I've got a dump button, which he wouldn't have there, so I just think that he would apologise for that anyway, because inside, in that moment, on live TV, he's not sort of thinking, we're all right, we're post-watershed now, but if it was 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, I'd have had to wade in and apologise. So I think, because we look up Ofcom language, sometimes I do it to scare the producer, Dean, and flirt with the idea of pushing Ofcom regulations absolutely as far as you can go, which is why I asked about testicles. I think it becomes more problematic when you're using it to refer to testicles than it is when you're just using it to refer to rubbish, when you're saying, it was all a load of rubbish. But I would say, the qualifications professional broadcaster, brackets, allegedly close brackets, I would say that the presenter was just being cautious and there wouldn't have been any problem at all, particularly because it was after 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, because, you also see it if a single fan is picked up by the microphone swearing, that happens as well, and they apologise then. I
think you just why have two sets of rules? Why not just behave all the time as if it's pre-watershed, and then you can't possibly go wrong? There's no downside to being overcautious, is there?
Absolutely.
So, are you accepting that? Bearing in mind my qualifications as a professional broadcaster of 20 years, more than 20 years standing, although I've never done a football game.
James, who am I to doubt you?
Thank you very much indeed, Dean. I'll take my second round of applause of the day. But I will exclude myself, obviously, from the competition to win the Mystery App board game. Thank you, Dean. Watershed and testicles. Paul's in Thundersley. Paul, question or answer?
I have an answer for you, James, and I'm very excited.
Well, you don't sound it.
No, I am really
You do now.
excited.
You do now. That's better.
This has made my day that I've actually got an answer to a question.
Thank you. Go on. What have you got?
So it's to the tree question in relation to how it grows against the road. So
as a tree grows, trees are reactive, so they will put more leaves on the side that has more benefit to photosynthesize, i.e. next to the sun.
Yeah.
When vehicles brush underneath them, they're obviously knocking the leaves off, so the tree hasn't got the ability to photosynthesize, so we'll put the leaves elsewhere. If the vehicles aren't frequent enough, then the leaves might get knocked, but then the secondary thickening, because tree grows as they put on rings, that will then occur, and then they would require pruning. But if it's frequent, you'll probably get minimal growth underneath those areas.
Because, I mean, it is a sort of form of intelligence, for want of a better word. It's just saying, well, why would we're not going to do that again, because it'll just get knocked off again.
Yeah.
Or is it getting knocked off again and again and again and again and again?
Again and again and again.
And again and again and again.
The tree will go, this isn't productive.
Right, yes. So the tree does at some point register not to put more effort into that zone. So if the bus route changed, then after a couple of years it would start growing back again, but not the next week.
100%.
I love that. Qualifications.
So I'm a senior environmental advisor for National Highways and a chartered horticulturalist and member of the technical member of the Arboriculture Association.
Blimey, you love your trees then?
I do love trees.
Have you got a favourite tree?
Yeah, I have actually.
What is it? Tell me.
Yeah, a Sequoia dendron giganteum.
Oh, you mean a species as opposed to an individual tree? Is that?
Yeah, so that is it's like a giant redwood. But yeah,
and have you been to see them in America?
No.
Where have you seen it?
Enough.
Where have you seen it? Q.
In a book.
Is that it? You've never seen one in the bark?
No, I've seen like giant redwoods and things, but not proper giant redwoods like in America.
Yeah, not really giant.
We get them here, but
they've got one in Kew, I think, haven't they?
They have, yeah, but it's not.
It's not very giant.
It
is red though.
No,
I mean, it's half there.
Yeah, it's beautiful. They're very, very beautiful trees.
Yeah. There was something else I needed to ask you. What's air pruning? Are we talking about air pruning? Is that the official phrase? Is that the technical phrase?
It technically is, yeah, because it's brushing past and taking the leaves off.
That'll do. A round of applause for Paul. Not quite. Not a lot of people are thinking, because you did have quite a long list of qualifications, that some people would think that might get you a Ray Liotta, but a lot of people do your job, don't they? I mean, you're not the only. Several. Last week we had a question about whistles, dog whistles. A bloke who rang in was the official archivist of the major dog whistle manufacturer in this country for the last 100 years. You're not on that level, are you?
Oh, all right.
No, there's no harm in it, mate.
Knocked me off my perch.
There's no harm in it. I've got 2 rounds of applause today. I didn't come close to getting a Ray Liotta. I presented this programme and I invented the Ray Liotta, and I've never had one. So I'm just saying, for the benefit of the tape, that it's not. It's yeah.
Well, that has knocked me off my perch. I was excited.
What? What? You got a round of applause?
My whole life to get this Ray Liotta.
You're not going to get a Ray Liotta because you work for National Highways.
Worth a try.
Yeah, it was worth. Next time, eh? Next time, who knows?
Thank you.
Thank you. It's 12:45.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
It is 12:48. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We've done the rucksacks, we've done the nails, we haven't done the falling over, but we have done the tummy, we've done the tree, and I did the watershed, but we haven't done the parrot. So appropriately enough, we've got trees and parrots. Parrots in a tree, and what one? And falling over or having a fall. But I don't think there's an answer to that better than the one I already gave, despite Mark's. Ingratitude, actually. I've said scepticism earlier, but I'm going with ingratitude now. 12:49 is the time. Time for a couple more questions, perhaps. Hassan's in Slough. Hassan, question or answer? Hassan. Is Hassan there? What's he done?
Question, please.
What are you doing?
So the question is...
Hang on, what was that long pause for?
I'm here.
What?
Yeah, no, I'm here. I'm just parked up.
You've still got your radio on, haven't you?
I didn't pause. I said hi.
You did, but you've still got your radio on, haven't you?
No, I haven't. No, it's off. I'm speaking to you.
Really? It's just a massive delay on your line. I'll be quiet. You ask your question.
Cut out. No, you can't hear the radio. I can't hear the radio.
Okay.
Let me switch off the engine.
No, it's all right. You don't have to switch off the engine.
No, I must say, before I ask the question, the Paul was fascinating. When he talked about his That's all right. For you, I can do anything.
It's all gone weird now, hasn't it? Is that all gone? Is that gone weird for you as well? Can we make sure Hassan's all right there? I sounded like I was having a moment. Could be the technology. Paul's in Edinburgh. Question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on.
Well, with the birds.
Yeah, the parrot. The parrot.
Yeah, well, parrots, parakeets, and cockatiels.
Okay.
I've bred a lot of cockatiels, and it sounds like our wolf whistle, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But it's just the timbre.
You sound a bit distracted, Paul. Are you doing something else at the same time?
No.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah. So it's the timbre that they use that resonates with us, but it wasn't learned from parrots to humans. It's a natural sound.
So they make that noise. They do that, and that. They do that in the same way that another songbird sings the song they sing. It's just the song they sing. They've got a song to singers.
Well, it's specifically the parrot family.
Yeah.
But, and they do that with chicks, and the chicks respond to it. And I know this just from breeding them.
And so they just do it. They don't hear it anywhere. It's just the noise they make.
It is the noise that they make sometimes, but it's normally when the chicks need feeding.
Okay. And then,
It's to bring the chicks towards them. It does sound an awful lot like that.
Yeah.
And African greys obviously pick up a lot of things from us.
But not that.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Qualifications?
In general, pet shop for 10 years.
You still got it?
No, unfortunately not.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But you did. You had a lot of birds in your pet shop.
Oh yeah. They were my big thing.
Oh, look at that. Do you have any now? Do you have them? Do you keep one yourself as a pet?
Yeah, I've got 3.
Have you really? Are they there now?
Yeah. They're in the bedroom.
Oh, lovely. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, it takes all sorts, I suppose. I'm going to give you a round of applause, Paul. I was hoping we could get one of them to say something, but it doesn't really work like that, does it?
No, unfortunately not.
I love it.
And another thing to add on for the doctor that was saying about going over bumps.
Oh, yes.
He was right that your organs move, but the diaphragm that you use to breathe, that shoots up and falls down, and it gives you that sort of strange feeling.
That'll be part of it.
The diaphragm, the diaphragm is definitely part of it.
Great work, Paul. Thank you, mate. And I love that. 12:53 is the time. Tony says, when you whistle, my dog goes mental. Well, I won't whistle again then. I promise. I've got a dog whistle here, though. See if that... we're going to give Hassan another go. Are you sure? I mean, that went... All right, Hassan's in Slough. Hassan, question or answer?
Question, please. I do apologise for the long delay.
It wasn't your fault. It's not your fault. Why are you apologising?
Well, it's the first time it's happened in the last 15 years that I've been ringing you.
Well, I could apologise to you, couldn't I? I could apologise. It's the first time it's happened in the last 15 years that you've been ringing me. I'm not apologising.
Okay, I won't apologise.
Question or answer? It's too late now, Hassan. You've already apologised. You're going to have to apologise for apologising.
Okay, I'll apologise for apologising.
That's all right, mate. No harm done. Question or answer?
Question, please.
Yeah.
So the question is, before the invention of communication technologies such as the telephone or the telegraph, how did people book holidays abroad? So how would they book hotels or transportation before the invention of communications technology?
Letters.
But that would take a very long time, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Going abroad, they probably took about a few weeks.
And the rest. Depends where you're going.
Let's say from the UK to Europe or the Middle East or
you
India.
need an address, wouldn't you? Otherwise, you wouldn't know where you were going.
Yeah.
And therefore, you could write to that address saying, I'd like to come and stay for a fortnight, please.
So how would they get that address in the first place? Because there's no directory, there's no agency.
Ooh, you're a terrible one you are, Hassan. Well, they would advertise in newspapers, which have been around since the 16th, sort of 17th, 18th century. Newspapers and magazines would advertise.
Yeah.
You'd say, available, nicely appointed room in a riad in Marrakesh. Apply to P.O. Box 34344 or write to the Riyadh, the Medina, Marrakesh, and you'd write and you'd get a reply. And then you'd turn up hoping that everything had gone swimmingly and you'd just have your holiday.
Right, okay, that makes sense. So they would advertise through newspapers.
What else could... to be fair, I've let you expand your question after I responded initially by it must be by post. If there's no other way, even before the telegrams existed, there's no other way to do it. It would have to be by post. The mail boats would be going all around the world, wouldn't they?
Yes. Okay, that makes sense. So they'd have to plan well in advance then in order to exchange letters.
Well, you would, yeah. You would. Even in the early 20th century, if you read Agatha Christie, although telephones existed, an awful lot of business would be conducted by correspondence. In things like, I think even in The Mousetrap, they make their bookings by letter.
Right, okay, that makes sense. So this is your fourth round of applause today.
Third, is it?
I'll make it fourth. Inflation.
Yeah. All right, you're on. Well, I can't really. We're short of time, so I'll leave it on the board. I can't take it, but I can't see what else the answer would be. I need to be quick as well because I just want to play a little bit of something from the archive. I don't know if you remember, but Tony Green, the darts commentator and Jim Bowen's co-presenter on Bullseye, I accidentally announced I didn't announce his death. I kind of talked about him as if he'd already died when he hadn't, and we corrected that in plenty of time, but he did actually pass away this week. And he's such a nice man, such a lovely, lovely man. And I'm just going to play a little bit to mark his passing. He came on the show back in the day when we used to get away with all sorts of nonsense because we didn't have any listeners. We wouldn't get away with that now. What are you sniggling about? Stop sniggling.
That.
Well, it's true. I used to get away with murder she. Honestly, some of the stuff they let. I used to do a thing, right?
Yeah.
I'd eat a sweet. People would ring in and try and guess what the sweet was that I was eating.
What have I got in my mouth?
That's what it was called. It was called Beat the Sweet. Had a little theme tune as well.
Bring it back.
Beat the Sweet. I don't think it would pass with the current management.
No, I don't think. Quite rightly.
It's just a little moment for fans like me of the late now, but always great Tony Green.
Treble 20, 60. Another treble 20, another 60. And another treble 20! 180! Well done, Alan. Second three, good start. Treble 20, 60. Another treble 20, another 60. And another treble 20! 180! Brilliant.
Lovely that. Love to Tony's family as well, genuinely, because he brought a lot of joy to a lot of people. He really did. I think we're almost done for the day. Did you want a little bit of trivia? This is a lovely little bit of trivia for you. You remember we spoke to Sir William Blackburn, the chair of the Muslim War Memorial Trust, who had such great news in the budget yesterday, and he mentioned the gentleman that had founded the charity, that had founded the organisation. He is the father of someone that Sheila Fogarty knows well. Someone who I consider to be in the top 5 broadcasters in the country at the moment. It's Michelle Hussein's dad was the chap who started the movement to get a proper war memorial for Muslim soldiers. Isn't that lovely? Let's have a little one for the pub quizzes.
And she certainly is one of the best, without a doubt.
Exactly that. And that's it from me, really, for today. I've got a board game winner for you. I'm going to give it to Eileen. Eileen of the Blades. Scissors, Eileen of the Scissors. She gets the board game this week. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Sawbrick will be with you at 4, but now on LBC it's time for Sheila Fogarty. 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 It's time for Sheila Fogarty.